Coming up this morning, it is 30 minutes until the Saints begin training camp. Everyone is wondering if Alvin Kamara will be in uniform and taking reps. We'll have live updates from California via our NOLA.com Saints beat writers. What are the 5 biggest questions entering training camp? Well, 6 if you include Alvin Kamara. We have our Saints editor, Zach Ewing, here to answer these questions as the 2024 Saints season gets underway here live. And in a show for Whodats, we finished this one with a Who Day. Don't worry, it's all in fun, and it's all coming up next on the Dattitude podcast.
If you're looking for the latest scoop and in-depth interviews on the Saints, the NFL, the Pelicans, LSU, along with the best bets of the week, then lucky you. Along with high-powered, in-the-know guests who cover our teams, Jim Derry brings plenty of Dattitude. And he'll always tell you the way it is, or at least the way he thinks it is.
Where you at, New Orleans? And hello to my friends elsewhere, everywhere, out there who still have no apologies for Falcons fans as we begin a new pigskin campaign. That's right. Nothing but clean slates and wishful thinking here. Well, sort of. This is Dattitude, episode number 257, presented by Evangeline Securities for a Wednesday, July 24th, 2024. I am your host, Jim Derry, and whether you're watching on one of our NOLA.com social media channels or listening on demand to the podcast, as always, I thank you for being a part of the Dattitude family. Rocky, you're first. You're here first. Good morning. Your number one question is the O-line. You are jumping the gun, my friend. We got some things to talk about first. We're not just jumping into O-line. What are the O-line? We're talking about the O-line for, I don't know, 5 months? We will be talking about the O-line again today at some point. I would imagine that one of the top 5 questions of the day is about the O-line. You see that at our topics of the day. Of course, we're going to start off with Kamara. That's coming up. And our extra point is the buzz cut on Joe Burrow. Have you seen it? Oh, man, you got to see it. That's coming up at the end of the show. So you'll want to stick around all day. As Rocky did, you can be a part of the show by typing in your comment on YouTube, Facebook, or X. Well, I guess not X today. We're not live on X today. We are working on that. Don't get me started. We ask if you haven't already done so to subscribe to our YouTube page, where you will always know when we're going on the air live, as well as have access to Gabe's short takes. If you haven't seen the shorts, we're running short. We have 1 or 2 a day, every day, even on the weekends when I'm supposedly off, but not really off. It seems like I'm always at the computer, but that's okay. I do it out of love, especially once football starts. There is no day off. Once it really starts, I'm not talking about today when they show up in pads and kind of knock each other around a little bit, whatever. But it is exciting nonetheless. You can get in touch with me if you don't know this already on X at Jim Derry Jr. or via email at jderry@theadvocate.com. Couple birthdays to announce. One, Cindy Derry Boucher, my sister. She's celebrating a birthday. She's got gray hair, but she's younger than me. So it makes me feel, I don't know. I'm not going to mess with my sister today. Happy birthday, sis. She's out there somewhere. And then guess who else's birthday is tomorrow? Alvin Kamara. Are we going to talk about him? Is he going to practice on his birthday? Is he going to practice the day before his birthday? Now, Dennis Allen says he expected Alvin Kamara to be on the practice field this morning. Practice begins in 25 minutes, 11:30 Central Time in Cal Irvine. Gabe Henderson is going to be monitoring social media, and especially our NOLA.com Saints beat writers. We're going to find out if he's on the practice field or not. You will hear it live here on the Dattitude podcast. Or if you listen on the fact, you'll probably already know. But if you don't know, we're going to tell you anyway. So we will certainly be monitoring that. I thought it was important today to have our own on the show. And who better than Zach Ewing, who is the Saints editor and He's the one that is assigning all these different stories to our Saints beat writers. So he is not in Irvine. I think he is home in Livingston Parish, I believe. Not 100% sure. We'll find out pretty sure. Certainly. I don't know. Jesus, I'm tongue-tied this morning. We'll find out later. How about that? But we are certainly going to spend a lot of the show this morning talking about Alvin Kamara and not just the 5 top questions. But we do have plenty of questions. But you know what we're going to do before we go on? Because I have something that's not necessarily related to the goings-on of right now, kind of, sort of, indirectly, that I want to bring up. But you know what? Let's bring in Gabe, as we're going to do every Monday and Wednesday here on the show. And then when we do our Pick'em show on Thursday, I'm going to ask him his pick of the weekend. I'm going to get his pick of the weekend, but we haven't talked about that yet. Now he knows. Gabe Henderson, what's up?
So, Jim, when we discussed me coming on every morning, one of the things that we talked about is we wanted the listeners, the viewers, to kind of get to know a little bit about me.
Yeah.
And as some of you know, some of you don't know, I am one of NOLA.com's sports betting writers, and as such, I follow the latest news in the sports betting world, all the lines and all that jazz. And one thing that you and I talked about after we went off the air on Monday is I found a little nugget on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. There was a bettor over the weekend that wagered in total about $2 million on 8 different golfers not to win the Open Championship. None of those 8 golfers won. He won $35,000. However,
off of a $2 million bet.
Off of a essentially $2 million bet.
Okay.
And I'm not going to name this individual. I'm not trying to get in the mud. I have a problem with people in general who bet like this and who call themselves betting professionals and bet like this. I don't know if you recall, I think I told you about it. There was a bettor recently who put, I think, $7,000 on the United States first quarter money line against South Sudan at minus 3,500 odds. Well, he lost all of that. So I don't understand.
We don't advocate asininity, whether that's a word or not. Maybe it's asinine to even say the word asininity, but whatever it is, we don't advocate that here on the Dattitude podcast, especially when you're betting something where you'd be better off putting your money in a government bond. It would yield more.
Yeah, the shortest line that he bet was minus 2216. And don't call yourself a professional bettor and go around giving people betting advice if your betting advice is to throw a lot of money on chalk favorites. Because the one time it doesn't work, you're going to take heavy losses. And my advice to someone who has $2 million, obviously, a $70K loss or whatever it is, which was, I think, the highest possible loss for this bettor. That's nothing to someone who is throwing around $2 million on the weekend. Throw it in a savings account. You'll net $100,000.
So your advice is to tell people not to take $2 million and bet on the Kansas City Chiefs to beat the New Orleans Saints. That's what you're telling me.
Correct.
All right. Well, that sounds pretty safe. So, I mean, we use logic here on Dattitude, and I'm glad I have you behind the scenes because that actually sounds fairly logical. I mean, in other words, when he says, by the way, when Gabe talks about minus 2150, what that means is in the real world, you would have to bet $2,150 to win 100.
Yeah.
There isn't a thing on the planet, I don't think, that I can think of that I would bet $2,150 to win 100. There is no sure thing in sports, as we saw, and I can't even remember the guy's name, but the guy who finished either ended up second or third, but with about 8 holes to play, there was some guy I never heard of. And if Uncle Big Nick was here, he could tell me his name because he told me, oh, this guy's big on the DP tour or whatever. I don't know, and I don't care. But I guarantee you, if you were betting on his odds not to win the tournament, again, I don't remember the dude's name, but he was winning with about 10 or 11 holes to play. But they were probably somewhere around minus 4,000. So, in other words, put up 4,000 and win 100. Makes no sense.
No, especially when it's $2 million.
We're going to talk about, actually, you bring this up, Gabe, and this is a great segue. And I'll leave you on here for this because the odds have actually changed on the Saints. So you want to talk about betting things, you wouldn't bet against this because I don't know if you can actually. You can't bet on, not that I know of. I don't think if you can bet on a team not to win the Super Bowl, but I can only imagine what the odds would be. I mean, I wouldn't bet on it. So the Saints are now, if you've been following us for the past few months, the Saints a month or so ago, and I haven't checked in a while, so I don't know if this just happened or it happened 2 weeks ago. So I haven't looked at the NFC South numbers because we've been doing getting ready for our previews. AFC West comes on Friday, by the way. Larry Holder will be on Friday as we do part 2 of the 8-part series. But the Saints, who were plus 8,000 to win the Super Bowl very recently, that means if you bet $100 on them and they win the Super Bowl, you get $8,000. It's now up to plus 10,000. So what that tells me is no one is betting on the Saints. Jerry is thrilled. Training camp is here. Hallelujah. A-Town says that guy could have given him $2 million and he could have spent in 3 to 5 days. You know what? I'd rather do that. That would be more fun. I ain't betting $2 million to win whatever it is. But anyway, they're also, Gabe, plus 4,500 now in the conference to win the conference, up from plus 4,000. Interestingly, though, the odds to win the division have remained constant at plus 340.
See, that's interesting. I assume you were looking at DraftKings, right?
DraftKings, yep.
Yeah. So I use FanDuel. I try and write a weekly update on the Saints odds. Sometimes there's nothing to write about because they don't change. But this week I actually did put one out, and my book of choice is FanDuel. So it's really odd at FanDuel.
What are they?
Super Bowl odds have stayed the same. They're plus 8,000. Their odds to win the NFC are plus 3,800. Their odds to make the playoffs went from plus 180 to plus 172. Not much change there. But there was a change in the division. It was really interesting. So the Falcons at FanDuel have stayed the constant favorite since acquiring Kirk Cousins at minus 130. They remain the same at minus 130. The Buccaneers, Saints, and Panthers odds all got longer over the week.
Interesting. Well,
so
there
was
that means somebody bet on the Saints at FanDuel is what that means. So if you're looking for a bargain, if you want to bet on the Saints, I'm like I said, asininity. We go back to that word. That maybe not be a word. I don't have Webster in front of me. But if you're looking to make a bet on the Saints, at least to win the Super Bowl here in New Orleans and have that Netflix movie made about them, you'd be better off going to DraftKings, where you get, if you bet $100, you get $10,000 if the Saints win the Super Bowl. If you bet $10, I'm no math whiz, but I can tell you this pretty quickly. You bet $10 on the Saints to win the Super Bowl. I am not telling you to do this, but if they win the Super Bowl, you would get one. I'm verklempt even thinking about it because it's just a silly bet. You'd get $1,000. So there you go.
Yeah. So the odds at FanDuel have changed just a little bit. The Buccaneers, I believe, were plus 250. They're now plus 310. The Saints were plus 350. They're now plus 380. And the Panthers, who to begin the offseason were plus 650, I believe, to win the division. Those no one's touching those, so they're now plus 1,000. And the Falcons are actually, now that I just looked, they've changed since yesterday. They're now minus 120 as opposed to minus 130.
Jerry says, thank God he doesn't bet on games. Yeah.
I mean, in a world where you have so many upsets.
Look,
I mean, you have the Appalachian States beating Michigan. You have Leicester City winning the Premier League. Some of the biggest betting anomalies. I just don't understand betting $2 million to win a potential $35,000.
I'm with you, my friend, but stupidity exists everywhere, and it is what it is. All right, we'll talk to you. We'll see you on Friday. We'll talk to you again on Monday.
Sounds good.
Gabe Henderson, everybody. All right, before I get to my friend Zach Ewing, who's in the green room, let me tell you real quick. And as we monitor Saints training camp, which we will be doing, practice starts supposedly in 15 minutes. We will be monitoring as we go on this morning. And as we do, give me a second to tell you how our friends at Evangeline Securities can help you figure out the rest of your life. If you own a family-run or privately held business, there's a good chance you might have thought about what your world might be like if you sold your business and moved on from that day-to-day grind. Evangeline founding and managing partners Nick, Braden, and Ron Hemel can help arm you with the information you need to decide if that's possible. And if it is, take you to the next step. How? First and foremost, I told you I'm tongue-tied this morning. First and foremost, how about that? Our founding father is 80 years now. They will maximize the value for your business by scheduling a complimentary valuation. You might not even have a clue on how much your business is worth. You can rest assured that Nick and Ron care. They came home after gaining invaluable experience in the New York City financial world to help the people at home who need them. And they opened their offices on Poydras Street and in Lafayette. And as Paul Harvey would say, we'll tell you the rest of the story before today's extra point, that is. Well, I don't know if Paul Harvey had an extra point, but he didn't really care about the Saints either. So anyway, while you're listening here, you can check out our friends at www.evangelinsecurities.com. Okay, let us move on to the New Orleans Saints. It is time. Zach Ewing, what is going on?
Hey, Jim. I got to get a new mug. I read this week that one of the two things you're not supposed to do in a mug shot is wear sunglasses. I look like a bug in that shot you've got.
I couldn't find any. Most people are easy to go find a mug and drag a mug. I like one search. I even search through. This is a while ago, so I haven't looked in the past few months. But I'd like go and search through your Facebook pro. I couldn't find anything, so that was the best I could do.
I don't. So
yeah, give me a new mug, and we'll make sure we get it for next time.
At least I'm a bug at Lambeau Field. There's worse places.
There's definitely worse places. Rocky's still spouting that the Saints are going to win 10 games.
How long is that going to take them, though? Is that this season, or I'm just kidding?
You didn't say how long. Right. They will win 10 games before the 2026 season is over. There's a good chance that'll happen. All right, Zach, let's get into it. First off, before we get to the 5 questions, let's talk about Alvin Kamara. And again, we'll know very shortly. We're monitoring social media as we go on. We're monitoring our own Saints beat writers that are all in Irvine, California right now. But talk about Kamara and the significance. First off, just make a guess. Dennis Allen says he expects him to be at practice. That indicates to me that he knows something, that maybe they're close to a deal, but maybe he's just trying to be positive.
It could be. It could also just be that for every practice Alvin Kamara misses, it's a $50,000 fine under the terms of the CBA. So he may just want, we saw Brandon Ayuk do this. We've seen other players do this. I think Chris Jones did it in Kansas City last year. He'll be there. He will be at practice, whether he participates in team drills, and they're not going to be in pads for a few days anyway. But if this is still going on when they get to pads, if he's in full pads and those sorts of things, we'll see. I kind of doubt he's going to be a full participant. I just think, he posted the picture on Instagram of himself and Marshawn Lynch, and the obvious implication there is, I'm just here so I won't get fined, which is the famous Marshawn Lynch line. So
you're saying he'll be wearing 40. He'll be wearing 41, but he might not, be a full go.
It might just do some individual drills. Honestly, they're not going to do a ton anyway.
Right. Exactly.
They're going for 90 minutes. They're really just getting out there and stretching their legs and catching, throwing some passes, hitting some sleds, maybe that sort of thing. We're not going to see a ton for the first 3-4 days of camp, and that's true around the league. And I don't think, by the way, we'll get as long as the media is all following the rules, we're not going to get any updates until the end of practice. So we won't even know what he's doing until then.
Sometimes I say a lot of things that are old fart things, but I grew up in a time when I walked to school 7-10 miles uphill. They used to practice 2-a-days, and they would get out there and really go at it. And you can't even do 2-a-days anymore because they don't even, is it really practice even? When does real practice start, you think?
I would say, so they go, what is today? Today's Wednesday, so they go 4 days, and then they have Sunday off, and they're back at it Monday. I'm going to say when they're back at it Monday, you're going to see them hit it a little bit harder.
Okay.
You might get some shells and shorts. I can't tell you exactly what the rules are, how many days they have to do in T-shirts and shorts, and then they get a couple days in shells and shorts, and then they can finally go full pads. I'm going to guess next week is when we really start to see some 11 on 11 that we could actually draw at least some conclusions from.
So it's 4 days of
to this point, and I know we're going to get to this, but to this point, it's been good news. Chase Young passed his physical; he's going to practice.
That is good news.
who was banged up from a weight room incident in the spring. He's passed his physical. He's going to practice, although he may be limited at first. I mean, they've basically got everyone they expected to be there and as healthy as they could hope for, outside of Juwan Johnson and Tano Passignon. So who we knew were not going to be available.
Good morning, Brian. He's got a question. What's good? I don't know what's good. We'll find out what's good soon enough. Pre-camp pressers, grain of salt. I know I usually show pressers on the show, or at least pieces of them. I didn't think there was any reason to. I mean, it was a bunch of blah, blah, blah to me.
Speaking of pressers, Jim, just real quick, I will say what's very interesting is that Alvin Kamara is scheduled to be one of the players available for interviews after practice today.
That is interesting.
And they put on these things they send out to the media. Oh, hey, this is subject to change. So that doesn't mean that he's actually going to show up. But in a couple of hours, he's scheduled to speak to the media. That's going to show as much as anything how close to a deal they are. Because if he actually speaks and he's not just – they're not going to let him speak if he's going to get out there and say this organization is shortchanging me and I'm unhappy. And like if they let him speak, to me, that means that they're pretty confident the deal is going to get done, let's say before the first preseason game.
Well, one thing about AK is he was one of the ones that was outspoken last year, which is actually kind of surprising. So maybe he'll be outspoken again. I don't know. The second part of Brian, does this make sense to tear up the contract, give him a $30 million 3-year deal? I think my own opinion is, and I've stated this before, is I think 3-year deal is way too long, in my opinion, because again, he turns 29 tomorrow. I personally would rather see a 2-year deal if you want to guarantee him most of $10 million a year and give him a 2-year, $20 million deal, which I think is close to probably what he would get, and guarantee most of it. I'm fine with that. But I think for this team that could very well be, and you and I think both are about the same spot where we think this team's going to finish. I'm probably a little bit more negative than you, but if this team has to tear it up and start over, which we don't know if they ever would or not, you can't be saddled with a 30-year-old running back with 2 more years of $10 million, in my opinion.
Well, first of all, to Brian's question, you can't just tear it up. You can't just say, oh, that cap hit next year doesn't exist. Like you can't do that. So now you can push that money into the future. You're allowed to do that, but you can't just make it go away by saying, oh, that contract doesn't exist.
Right.
The NFL won't let you do that. So if you're going to add 3 years to his deal, that's going to mean pushing more money off into the future. And the Saints obviously have a penchant for kicking the can down the road. I mean, we all know that they'll do that. In
fairness, Zach, I think he means to, like add 2 years. So like start over. So 3 years.
But he's I'm with you. I mean, I guess long story short, I'm with you that you can't expect him to continue to produce for 3 more years. And as far as like, again, adding 2 years to his deal, his cap hit for next year is already $29 million.
Right. So that's definitely not going to happen.
But you can't, a 3-year, $30 million contract means you're just giving him another $1 million for 2 more. Like that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So,
but he's not guaranteed any money next year. So really, so I don't know that that's necessarily, that's what I'm saying. Whatever contract you did for him to quote unquote rip anything up, which we don't necessarily mean that in a literal sense, but he would have to get a large chunk of guaranteed money.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, and from his perspective, that may make sense, but from a cap perspective, I don't know that they can pull that off in the terms that Brian was talking about. I think ideally the Saints would like to have him around for 3 more years, but he's got to show me something. He's got to show them something this year. I mean,
exactly. We don't know what he's going to show.
Bad years.
I mean, exactly. And that's kind of my point. And look, let's be realistic. I'm trying to start the year as positive as possible with hopes. I think there's a chance that this team can win the division and be decent. Their odds say that they have a chance. They're plus 340, which in Vegas's odds means that they're going to have to win or thereabouts to win the division. However, I also think being realistic, Zach, you got to look and say, at the bare minimum, there's a 30 to 40% chance that this season is an absolute GD disaster and that they have to blow this team up. They're going to have a new coach next year, 30, 40% at least to start over. And if you're doing that, you need to have as few salary cap issues as possible going forward.
You're right, and they've tried to do that this year. And the other factor is that as of right now, for the 2025 draft, for the first time in 8 years, they have every single one of their draft picks.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there was maybe 1 year in those last 8 that they also had that, but I don't think so. I think they've traded at least one pick, and they may still this year. The other thing to your point is when they restructured Taysom Hill's deal a few weeks ago, they left themselves like $6 to $8 million in cap space that they have not used yet for this year, for the 2024 season. It is not
David
like
Bakhtiari.
well,
sorry.
It's not. I mean, I don't know if it's going to be David Bakhtiari or not, but it's not like the Saints to just leave that money under the cap.
You're right.
I think they're going to use it somewhere.
I agree with you. Maybe it has to do with Kamara. I don't know. The best thing, Jerry wants him to pay Kamara now. Here's a question I have about Kamara as well. If this, let's just say, let's be on the positive side. Say the Saints do have the season that most fans want them to have. They do win 10 or 11 games. I think unlikely, but possible. And they win the division. And it shows Klint Kubiak system is working. And, they take the step forward that fans wanted them to take. And Kamara has a bounce back season. Wouldn't he then be more inclined to want to stay here anyway? Because this is, going in the right direction and he wants to finish his career where he started. I mean, don't you think they'd have a great chance to re-sign him anyway?
Yes. I think from the Saints perspective, that's the scenario in which you want to get something done now so that you can maybe get him a little bit cheaper, a little less guaranteed money because he hasn't proven that he can do it at this age. And from AK's perspective, he'd do it now because he knows that as of right now, he's not going to be on this roster next year, not under his current contract because the cap hit is so high. So, yeah, I mean, it to a certain.
That's why it just makes more sense to me, Zach, to either give him a 2-year deal, meaning this year or next year, and guarantee whatever you want, or just say, you know what, maybe it's in our best interest to just kind of like, look, we can restructure a little something, but nothing major, and kind of say, we'll give you $10 million. I don't know what what does he do right this year if he comes under the current contract? What does he do? I forget.
His cap hit right now is like $18.5 million. I think.
Okay,
it's the highest on the team.
Yeah, so I mean, it would behoove both of them to get some kind of thing done. I just think it doesn't make sense to do anything long term because I think again both sides are going to want to come to the table if things go the way they're supposed to, and if they don't go the way they're supposed to, then I think both sides would want to part, in my opinion. So, I mean, either way, depending on how this season, and then you're stuck in the middle if they go 8-9 and they have the same old crap and they keep the A again, and then we have to do this all over again. But I think there's a small. I got to be honest. I think there's a very small chance. I think there's a much better chance they're either really bad or really good than they're just flat out 8-9, 9-8 again. That's just my opinion.
I think that's exactly what they're going to be.
I know you do, and
I just think that it's a Met team. The schedule is still pretty easy, so there's going to be some wins out there, but I don't see more than that.
All right, we are going to monitor the Alvin Kamara situation at practice. Again, practice is scheduled to start any moment now, and I know Zach is going to probably be getting texts from his guys. Gabe's going to be monitoring in the background as well. So if we have any breaking news to give you, and I'm assuming we will, either Zach or Gabe will interrupt me as we go along. But let's get to the 5 questions that we have. And I put together a list of my top 5 questions. I'm going to put them in order here. I didn't put number 1, 2, or 3, or 4, or 5, whatever. But these are my questions in order. And I made fun earlier of Rocky for bringing up the O-line before I could even start it. But of course, that's not question number 1. So there you go. I already screwed up. But my number 1 question, and we're going to get to the O-line, is I thought Matthew Parris's story with insight on Dennis Allen and the camaraderie that he's trying to put together with his team was outstanding. It was just, besides the fact that, he asked the exact right people the right questions, I just thought it was very well written. And anyone who hasn't read it yet should go on and read it. That being said, this kumbaya, we all love DA, everything's great again. I don't know why, but I'm having a hard time believing it necessarily. I think of course, I think it's number one thing is you got to get the players together in the locker room. And if they buy in, then everyone else will follow. But I'm asking you the question, do you believe that this new love that surrounds Dennis Allen is real?
Sure. I mean, it's the first day of training camp. I actually think most of the players who are left like DA. I do. I mean, I think like
Okay.
some of the guys who didn't like him are gone. Particularly one who wore number 13 on his jersey. I think
he doesn't like anybody.
But look, this is sort of the age-old question about, you ask the team that won the Super Bowl or the World Series or the NBA Finals, like, how did you do? Oh, we have great team chemistry. We all loved each other and we were all pulling in the same direction all year. Oh, okay, but did the great culture follow the winning, or did the winning follow the great culture? Right?
Good question. Yeah.
You never hear teams that sucked say, you know what? Sure, we sucked, but we had great culture in this locker room. You never hear that.
I don't know. Sometimes I think you do actually. You have heard that in the past with this lot. Maybe not a lot, but I think you, in the past Peyton years, some of those 7 and 9 years, I think you kind of did hear that. We're still all together.
Yeah, I mean, maybe so. And last year, they never gave up. I mean, they tried to come back in all these games, but then at the end of the year, they said we need a cultural reset, and we need to, Mickey Loomis has been on that warpath about needing to change the culture of the locker room and things like that. So I guess the question is, does winning beget culture, or does culture beget winning? I think the answer is probably a little bit of both. I credit Dennis Allen for realizing he had to change in some way. They went 9-8 last year against a historically easy schedule.
Yes.
And it was not only historically easy on paper, but then they caught these breaks where they didn't have to face like 4 starting quarterbacks of opposing teams. I think it was Minnesota, Chicago, New York, and Atlanta all had backup quarterbacks playing against them. And Indianapolis, that's 5. So, okay, he went 9-8 against that schedule. That's not very good. He's never been very good as a head coach. Credit him for realizing something had to change. And he has not only changed things on the field by hiring a whole new offensive staff, but he's trying to change things in the locker room too. And I think that's kind of the point that Matt tried to get across in his story. And I echo what you said. I mean, everybody, if you're a Saints fan, you have to go read that story. I don't care if you subscribe to NOLA.com and then go unsubscribe right after you read it. It's worth the sign up, $5.
Absolutely it is.
You get, and then you get all of our training camp coverage for a month too. And then if you want to stay on, great. If not, I don't blame you. Everybody spends their own money their own way, but it's worth it by itself. So
agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah, go check it out, NOLA.com/Saints. But what I'm trying to say is, like, you credit him for changing these things, but if things don't change on the field, particularly in those first 5-6 weeks, which I know we're going to talk about, it's not going to matter.
No, I agree. And one thing that compounds to show you how poorly I think this team was coached last year. Again, I'm not saying he can't turn it around, because I think with the right people around him, he can. Okay, so I'm saying he can. I'm not saying he will. I'm saying he can, but you look at the numbers, and the Saints were in the top 10. This is hard to believe. Ross Jackson was pointing this out the other day, and I didn't realize this part, but the Saints were in the top 10 in both points scored and points allowed. I think they were 9th in offense in points scored and 8th in defense in points allowed. And this I know on my own from doing our stats here. They were in the top 12 in both offense and defense in yards allowed per game. So to have those type of numbers and to be so mediocre against a ridiculously easy schedule. I mean, if you would have showed me those numbers before last season, I would have said, okay, they're going to win 10 or 11 games, the bare minimum. They're going to win this division easily. And yet they found themselves in so many situations last year, Zach, where they were either trying to catch up and couldn't against the Lions and Rams, or games where they just blew it, like the Packers. I mean, you win that Packers game last year and go 3-0, we're talking about a whole different season.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and honestly, they weren't even playing that well at that time.
No,
they kind of scuffled through.
Played better in the second half of the season. Yeah,
Tennessee and Carolina, and then in Green Bay for the first 3 quarters of that game, they did play well, especially on defense. And you thought, man, now they're hitting their stride. I think at that time they had Tampa Bay at home, Houston on the road coming up, New England. Teams that they could beat. And you go, man, this team could start 6-1 or something. And then all of a sudden, that fourth quarter happens. Carr
gets the whole trajectory.
They lay an egg against Tampa at home the next week. All of a sudden, it's 2-2, and you're fighting. But if they could start out and because the schedule is so much more difficult at the beginning of this year, if you could get a little momentum, beat Carolina and then win 2 of the next 3 or something, and get to 3-1, man, the entire tenor of this would change, I think, from everybody.
All right, you're jumping ahead. That's a question coming out.
If.
All right. Question number 2. Can the offense overcome the shortcomings of this front line?
They better. I like, honestly, we don't even know.
You've had 2 great answers already, but sure, and they better. I love it.
We don't even know what the offensive line looks like yet. Like we saw in minicamp,
you think you know
at right tackle, they had Taliesin Fuanga at left tackle. What if Penning gets out there against Arizona in the first preseason game and doesn't look like he's improved?
Yeah.
Then you've got Ali Udoh who may slot in at right tackle. Maybe you move Fuanga to right tackle. I mean, there's this whole game of musical chairs. I saw a question about Bakhtiari. Maybe at that point you realize it's worth rolling the dice on a guy who can't stay healthy. Somebody's going to sign David Bakhtiari, but there's a reason nobody has signed him yet, and that's because he can't stay healthy. Same thing with Michael Thomas, incidentally.
But what does it hurt though? What does it hurt for the Saints? It's not going to cost you a whole lot. I don't want, but just veteran presence alone, the fact that he would be the left tackle on opening day without question, barring injury, is enough in itself. But his veteran presence alone to help some of these young guys, he and Eric McCoy, I think can make a world of difference on this offensive line and some of the backups as well.
What does it cost you? I don't think he's making league minimum. I mean, he's going to cost you most of your cap.
$5 million.
Yeah, but that's most of what you've got left. So now you've got to say, well, do we want to go try to chase Justin Simmons or an upgrade at safety, or do we want to get Bakhtiari? I mean, I
keep hearing the name Justin Simmons, and I'm not going to mention the podcast. They love them some Justin Simmons, but that is not a need on this football team. I mean, defensive backfield is like 5th on the list of things that this team needs. Why? I mean, you don't want to. It's like saying, you know what? I'm starving and I got a sandwich here and I don't want to eat it because I might be hungry later. Well, you're hungry right now. Damn it. Eat it. I mean, come on.
I mean, if you're comfortable with Jonathan Abram or Jordan Howden starting at strong safety, like
more comfortable than Trevor Penning playing right tackle.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, again, we don't get to see David Bakhtiari's medicals. We don't know. There's a reason nobody signed him yet. Okay. There's a reason the Packers let him go. We'll see. Back to the offensive line, like there's just question marks everywhere. So I have to think it's going to be a major problem. Eric McCoy, obviously very good. Cesar Ruiz has had an up and down career. I don't know that you call him, a stalwart or anything. And then you're throwing in maybe Nick Saldiveri or Ali Udoh at left guard, and you've got these 2 new starters at tackle. So let's take the 10,000 foot view here, and not as people who watch the Saints every day and listen to what they say every day. If you're from the outside looking in and you look at that situation, there is 0% chance you're at all confident in that group. Now,
I hear you.
Mickey Loomis is smarter than I am. Like, he's built a lot of good teams before. Klint Kubiak's system, the Kyle Shanahan system, it takes stress off of the offensive line. Like the 49ers, probably the weak point of their team last year was the offensive line, and they still managed to, to have a good offense last year. So, is it such an obstacle that they're doomed? I wouldn't go that far, but I think it's absolutely a weak point again.
Well, I mean, look, my biggest problem with this and the reason why, I know there are actually people out there who aren't doom and gloom and say, you know what, Klint Kubiak doesn't need this great offensive line. He's proved it in San Francisco, blah, blah, blah. Here's the thing. You still need to have a decent offensive line. You don't have to have the number 1 offensive line in the league, but you can't, in my opinion, have a line that you're going into the season as of right now. Again, you said it. I agree. It could change. They could sign someone. They could find out one of these guys that they signed in the offseason is an answer. But right now, you're going into training camp with you put your best lineman who isn't a center. You put your best lineman who isn't a center at left tackle. And right now, your best lineman who isn't a center is a guy that hasn't played a single snap in the NFL because he's been playing at Oregon State in the Pac-12. And that's who you're putting in. who's playing out of position, mind you. So that to me just tells me everything I need to know as of right now.
Yeah, it's now. Could it work? Like, yeah, I mean, I think Kalifunga might be a really good player. Is he going to be a really good player week 1 of his rookie season? That's hard for any rookie. Trevor Penning's got all the talent in the world. That's why they drafted him in the first round. Could this reset and moving him to the right side work? Could. I'm less confident on that than I am on Fuanga. And then the interior line you kind of piece together just like you've done the last several years. If you're Eric McCoy at center and you find whoever's playing best and stick him at guard. Like, yeah, there's a path for this to work. I just think it's kind of a narrow one. Like, there's a reason Pro Football Focus, which take their ratings with a grain of salt, but they've had the Saints offensive line number 32 in the NFL.
Yep, and they're not the only ones.
Because, again, from the outside looking in, it does not look like a strong group.
And if you're worse than the Tennessee Titans on the offensive line, you got real problems. But, again, it may work out. I mean, again, I've said this before. If the Saints offensive line can just be somewhere in like 22, 23 ranking range, if we come back here in like week 3 of the season, the Saints is ranked. Is that you or me?
That's me. Sorry.
Okay. If you come back here and the Saints are ranked 22nd, 23rd, or 24th by PFF in week 3, then I think they're probably doing okay. I know that sounds weird, but I think that's where we are right now. If they can be somewhere around there and protect Derek Carr enough and give enough holes and to allow things to happen, I think they will be okay. Whether that will happen, I don't know.
That's where they were last year, right? Their offensive line was probably in that 22, 23 range, and they were fine most of the time on offense. I mean,
once Andrus Peat, I think, got in there and shored up things, and they said, okay, the Trevor Penning experiment is done, and Andrus Peat went there and played way better than I ever expected him to. They were okay.
And they couldn't run the ball at all. A lot of
they didn't try to run the ball either, though.
Yeah, it's one of those damn lies and statistics that this team finished top 10 in offense in the NFL last year. They couldn't run the ball at all. So, but again, that's where if you could get to the level you're talking about, combined with Klint Kubiak's scheme to open some things up, you could probably be okay.
For sure. All right, let's move on. Question number 3. Speaking of Klint Kubiak, great segue. You didn't even know this. Will Kubiak make enough of a difference for this offense?
Yeah, I mean, it's a related question. I think they certainly look different, okay, just based on minicamp, based on OTAs, and I think different is good. I'm not going to sit here and bash Pete Carmichael. Pete Carmichael did a good job for this franchise for a long time, but I think everyone, Mickey Loomis and Dennis Allen included, saw the need for change. It was stale. It needed to change, and it's going to change. It's going to look a lot different. You're going to see a lot more 2-back sets. Well, you literally did not see a single 2-back set last year. So you will see some this year. You're going to see a lot more motion, play action, things like that. It's going to look different. And I think that is probably the biggest reason to be hopeful about the 2024 Saints, is that Klint Kubiak can unlock something. Look, we know Chris Olave is a talented player. We know Alvin Kamara is a talented player. We know Rashid Shaheed has a lot of talent. We know Derek Carr, when he's going good, can look like a top 10 quarterback in this league. So you have the players to do it. And the hope is that the scheme can kind of unlock opportunities for those guys.
Rocky's asking about Dalton Risner. I don't think he is available, Rocky. I think he signed an extension with the Vikings. So I don't think that is the case. Greg Davis, who dat Soul Patrol? Welcome to the show, Greg. Yeah, no, I agree with everything you've said. And I think that is a hope for optimism. I think one thing that Kubiak does too, we all know what Christian McCaffrey did, what George Kittle did, Brandon Ayuk and down the line. But I think one thing that Kubiak did with the 49ers that our help do, obviously didn't do it all on his own, Shanahan had a lot to do with it. But I think that he makes some of the lesser players better as well. Like, I think he would really help Kendra Miller in his second season, make Jamal Williams more relevant. I think you would see a lot of Jamal Williams actually with Klint Kubiak, in my opinion. And also you'd see those 3rd and 4th and 5th receivers playing a big part of the game.
Yeah, they got to figure out who the 3rd receiver is. That's one of the big storylines.
Yeah, for sure.
You've got Olave and Shaheed, but you really don't have anything proven at wide receiver 3. And let's be honest, the chances of any Olave and Shaheed or any two players in the NFL playing all 17 games is not very good. So at some point, somebody's going to have to step up and be one of the top 2 wide receivers. So that's a big storyline that we'll be watching. But I do think Kubiak will make a difference. Will he make enough of a difference? That's the key phrase in your question there. Like, I don't know. And this is another professional segue into your fourth question. The other thing is the offensive improvement has to surpass whatever slippage we see on the defensive side.
Without a doubt. Wednesday morning, Zach Ewing here with me on the Dattitude podcast, brought to you by Evangeline Securities. My friends Nick Braden and Ron Hemelt, www.evangelinesecurities.com. No doubt. And by the way, no update on Kamara as of yet. Gabe says he's scouring social media.
The media members aren't allowed to tweet that stuff out or anything until practice is over. So unless someone breaks the rules or somebody, a UC Irvine employee tweets out some contraband video or something, like, you're not going to know until 1 o'clock.
I think more likely is someone could tell someone else who little birdies go to ESPN or whatever. That's also a possibility. Yeah. But anyway, if we get any news as we go along, we will tell you here on Dattitude, but nothing as of yet. All right, question number 4, as Zach alluded to. Will the 2023 defensive issues resurface in 2024? And no question those issues were run stop. They were 19th in the NFL in trying to stop the run, which is not good for this Dennis Allen defense. And then they could not get a pass rush to save their lives last year. Will either one of those change or both in 2024?
Yeah, a key guy here is Chase Young.
Yeah,
Chase Young and Cam Jordan you have to get like an 8 to 10 sack season out of one of those guys, if not more. Yeah, you just have to. Can Carl Granderson repeat a career year? He slowed down by the end of last year. I mean, I think he's a solid player. I don't think he can be that star. So can you need another defensive end to step up? And if that's Cam Jordan, now that he's healthy, does he have one more big year left in him? Can Chase Young show that he's healthy? He may have the highest ceiling of any defensive end on the roster. Don't laugh, but can Peyton Turner put in 15 games and show you?
Absolutely, it's a possibility.
First round pick. Like, you need somebody to step up and show and help that pass rush out. To me, that's the number one thing. Number 2 is run defense, as you said, and I don't like. Here's the issue with the Saints' run defense. It's not just that they couldn't get off the field on like 3rd and short. There's never any negative plays. Like, you never. How often did you see opposing offenses in?
How many TFLs do they have?
Yeah, 2nd and 12, 3rd and 14. I mean, it just didn't happen. And the fact that they were still an average defense is a credit to how good the secondary was. And I think the secondary could still be elite, especially if Marshawn Lattimore stays healthy. You got, Marshawn Lattimore, Paulson Adebo looks like he could be a blossoming star. And he's playing in a contract year. You drafted Kool-Aid McKinstry. Between him and Alontae Taylor, you hope you have a good player in the slot. Tyrann Mathieu still looks like he's a good player. Like, I think the secondary could be elite. Demario Davis looks like he's still an elite player. Your linebackers, it's that front 4. You got to get a pass rush. You got to stop the run. I'll tell you another guy, Jim, that I'll have my eye on in camp, and that's Christian Boyd, who was a late draft pick for the Saints. But the guy's known as like a run stuffing specialist. Now, he played at Northern Iowa. Can he jump to the NFL in one season and still, but like in jumbo packages and things like that, could he make a difference and get you a couple stops on 3rd and 2? Boy, that'd be a huge bonus, because right now they don't really have that.
Here's your trivia question of the day. Of the top 100 players in the NFL last year who tackles for loss, how many do you think the Saints had?
0? 1?
No, they had 2.
Okay.
They had 2. Carl Granderson and Demario Davis.
I guess, but just by the sheer, there's only 32 teams. You got to have a couple.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be almost. By the way, number 92, tied for Nate second, which is part of the top. That is the top 100. They only had 8. So no one other than Demario Davis or Carl Granderson had more than 8 tackles for loss all season long.
So in other words, if you had asked me how many in the top 80 did they have, the answer would have been 0.
No, because those guys were both in the top 50, actually.
Oh, I thought you were saying they were tied for 92nd. I'm sorry.
No. Yeah, I worded it improperly. Before we move on, Jerry wants to know what battles are you looking at in camp as of now? So a bonus question.
I mentioned wide receiver 3. I think that's very important. Is it Cedric Wilson? Is it Equimanius St. Brown? Is it Bub Means, the rookie? Is it A.T. Perry? I think the Saints would love for A.T. Perry to flash and become, that wide receiver 3.
Yeah.
I think Cedric Wilson's probably the favorite, just because he's a good run blocker. He's a good possession receiver. He gives you things that you don't have in Olave and Shaheed.
Yep.
Olave can do everything, so let's leave him aside. But he gives you something you don't have in Rashid Shaheed, and so you get a little bit of size, you get some run blocking, you get that possession receiver. So I think Cedric Wilson's the favorite, but it'll be interesting to see, can A.T. Perry push him? Can EQ St. Brown push him? Bub Means, the rookie, what does he look like? I mean, so wide receiver 3. The other one would be linebacker. Pete Werner. Statistically had a good year last year, but he was not good in pass coverage. They brought in Willie Gay, who people raved about in the spring. Can Willie Gay push Pete Werner for playing time? And the third one would be safety, Jordan Howden or Jonathan Abram there at safety. Backup quarterback, if you want a bonus one, I think it's Jake Haener, but if Spencer Rattler shows a lot of growth from the spring to now, he could probably push Jake Haener as well.
What about Kool-Aid against /Adebo /Taylor?
Yeah, it could be good. I mean, it's just hard. We haven't seen Kool-Aid play yet.
Right.
So it's hard to say how ready he is. Can Alontae Taylor show that he's a better player in the slot? I think all those guys will play. But if Taylor continues to struggle in the slot, you have Lattimore and you have Adebo locking down the outside spots, well, then, yeah, he's probably going to lose a lot of playing time to Kool-Aid in the slot.
By the way, why don't they let you tweet from practice? What is the negative of giving people information on July the 24th?
Yeah, I don't have a great answer for you. I think it's just
because they're the Saints and they can.
Well, it makes it fair for everyone, so that a media member who maybe gets out there 30 seconds earlier than another doesn't get all the scoops, and then you have everybody racing out there. Instead, it's like, hey, when practice ends, then you can. I know during the season, I think it's a league-wide rule. I'm not sure about camp, but during the season, it's like there's only.
I can understand it during the season, I guess, more, because they're prepping for the week. And outlook. When I was covering high schools, there were coaches that would come up to me and say, "You're not going to tell anybody what you." Oh, yeah, as if I'm going to tell. But so during the season, I can understand it more. But during training camp, who cares? I don't know. That's just my opinion. Weird.
Yeah, I mean, they would like if you've ever been out to a Saints practice, just a little inside football.
It's been a little while, but yes.
If you're on your phone, like just texting someone, right, and you're facing the field, they'll come and tell you, "Hey, put your phone away," because they'll be afraid you're taking some surreptitious video. There's a certain period of time in which you're allowed to shoot video and photos, and there's a certain period of time that you can observe, but no video or photos can be taken. And then there's a certain period of time that no one can be out there. And like I said, you can't no updates until practice ends. I guess it just makes it fair for everyone. But
this is 2024. There are ways to, you don't have to look at your phone to necessarily send a text, but some people are technologically uninclined to do so. But anyway, let's move on. Question number 5. Are the first 6 games as tough as we think they are? We've talked about this schedule for quite a while now. We had our schedule show. I think you were the first one on after the schedule or not long after. But, we talk about this schedule over and over again, and I'll put it up here on the screen. Are those 6 games? I'm not asking you what they need to be yet, but are those 6 games or those 6 teams as tough as we think they are? Outside of Carolina, of course.
Every year in the NFL, there's going to be a couple of teams that you look back, like say at Thanksgiving, if someone were to watch this show and be like, they thought that the Eagles were a tough game. The Eagles are terrible, or what? I'm just picking a team at random, like
without looking at the date. But yes,
yeah, there's always a couple of teams that you that you think are going to be good, and they end up just being mediocre. The Saints were one last year, and then there's always a couple of teams that you think will be garbage, and they end up being really good, like Houston last year. And so that's going to happen with the Saints schedule too, where we look at this schedule, and at the end of the year, one of these teams is going to be way better than we thought. And then, like let's say that game October 27th at the Chargers, that may end up being like Jim Harbaugh gets that thing turned around.
That could be an interesting game.
One of the more difficult games on the schedule. And then the flip side of that is, I don't know, the Rams or the Packers or the Eagles or somebody may just not be as good as we thought. And we look back and so to answer your question, it's a long way of saying we don't know for sure if they're as tough as they look. All we can base it on is what we know right now. And it sure looks brutally tough. At least those weeks 2 through 5 to me look brutally tough. I don't think the Buccaneers will be unbeatable, especially at home. The Panthers, obviously, you want to win that game. I think it's weeks 2 through 5 there that look brutally tough.
They've struggled with, they've struggled with the Bucs at home as of late. That's for sure. Brian, and he corrects himself, says Juwan after, but Juwan Johnson, he's on the PUP, isn't he?
I don't think he's on PUP, but he is not playing.
Yeah, he's not going to be playing.
He is on PUP. Excuse me.
I thought he was.
But it's the camp PUP where you can come off
at any time, unlike Ramczyk.
Yeah, if you're on PUP when the season starts, that's a little bit different. But he's not expected to play before late in camp. I don't think we'll see him in any preseason games. I actually think his week 1 status may be in doubt, but we'll see.
JJ's asking if I'm keeping it positive, brother. I'm doing the best that I can so far. I mean, look, I agree with you, but I actually think there are a couple teams on this list. There's at least one that I think is not going to be nearly as good as everybody thinks they are. I'm trying not to give too many spoiler alerts as we started our NFL previews. Part 2 of our 8-part series is on Friday, by the way, the AFC West. But I don't think the Cowboys are going to be as good as – look, they don't have a running game. So the Saints can't stop the run, but they're good against the pass. I think they actually match up well with the Cowboys. And, again, we'll talk about this in a few weeks, obviously, as we get closer to the season. But so I think the Saints have a chance. I'm not saying they will. If they could start 2-0 this year like they did last year, I think it would be different this time around. And I definitely think the Cowboys is a team that they match up well with and could beat, except for Micah Parsons beating Derek Carr to whatever.
Well, that's what I was going to say is that you better get this offensive line straightened out. You're going to beat the Cowboys in Dallas. But I think there's a chance. I mean, like, look, we've talked the whole time. I know you didn't want to guess a record necessarily. But we've said the whole time if they just cannot start 1-5, they 2-4.
Absolutely.
2-4 is the bare minimum. You'd really love to be 3 after those first 6 games. And so obviously if you're trying to get to 3-3, Panthers and Bucs at home are 2 of them. You got to win one of those weeks 2 through 5. So what's the most likely? Well, the Eagles are the home game. The Cowboys could be vulnerable. We don't
not being the Eagles or Chiefs. They're just not.
We don't think it's the Chiefs. The Falcons, like, I don't know. The Falcons are going to be better, but are they going to be
unbeatable? They're the Falcons.
Yeah, the Saints could go in there and win the game.
I don't think there's ever going to be a scenario. I can't say ever because the Saints could be really bad and Falcons could be really good. But even then, the second time they play them is November 10th. I can't see a current scenario where I would say there's no way the Saints can beat the Falcons because, yeah, they're the underdog, but they're still the Falcons. I mean, but, Eagles and Gabe saying the Saints play the Eagles historically well. They're not beating Jalen Hurts. That's just my opinion. They just don't match up well with them. There was a question before I let you go. What do you think about Dallin Holker?
I really like the player, whether he makes the roster or not. I think he's a guy like if Juwan Johnson's still hurt and the Saints don't seek outside help at tight end, Holker could be on the week 1 roster. I think he's probably more of a practice squad guy throughout the season. I really like his game. The thing that he's not is, and Juwan Johnson's not really either, he's not really a blocking tight end.
Yeah.
And so if your starter is not a blocking tight end, Foster Moreau is, do you really want your other, do you have room to keep another tight end on the roster who also is not a blocking tight end? Kubiak's offense, maybe you do, but I think he just strikes me as a practice squad player. I really like him. I think he could be one of those guys. Like, he's going to have a big preseason game, I bet. The second or third preseason game, he's going to have one of the games 8 catches for 70 yards. Dallin Holker. But ultimately, if Juwan Johnson's healthy, I'm not sure there's room for him.
Yeah, I don't know how healthy Juwan Johnson's going to be, but regardless, I got to say at this point in time, ask me again in a few weeks, I'd be surprised if Dallin Holker doesn't make this football team. And at the bare minimum, he's going to be on the practice squad and then find his way onto the roster. I think that's like the bare minimum. But real quick before I let you go, I just think that you talked about 2-4, 3-3. If this team is 3-3, then I have to blow up my prediction for what I think this team's going to do this year. Because I agree with you. If they're 3-3, I think they're, I don't want to say easily is never the word with this team, at least not right now. But I think they cruise to a winning record. I'll just say that.
And also,
if they're 3-3.
If they're 3-3, and I was going to add one more thought on the Eagles. You said they couldn't beat the Eagles. The Eagles open the season with the Packers in Brazil. Then they go home and play a primetime game against the Falcons.
Yeah, so you're catching them at a good time.
It's a little bit of a letdown. Like they have these two huge games against teams that are thought of as playoff contenders to start the year, and then you come down to the Dome and play a noon game. I don't think it's impossible. But yeah, I'm with you. If they're 3-3, that Thursday night game against Denver, like people are going to start to get excited again. And Sean Payton's team comes in here, who I don't think will be very good, by the way. People will get excited again at that point.
Yeah, I will say this. One last thing, and I'm not trying to be negative, but I'm just saying, I think the Panthers are going to be way better than anyone thinks they are. And anyone that takes that game for granted is kidding themselves. So don't take the Carolina Panthers for granted. Brian says, less bass, more treble on the podcast.
I got a cold, so I don't know if that's I'm not sure what that means.
Me neither. I try to check my sound before every show. I know Friday I had terrible sound because we had all kinds of issues, but I have my my setup here as kind of a radio. It's on there's 4 different settings, and one of them is the radio setting. So that's what I'm using. So I don't know. I'm not an audio engineer. Thank you, Zach. And we will have you on again before the season begins. I appreciate you taking time out. And I know you got a lot to go monitoring.
Absolutely. We'll have all the updates, NOLA.com/Saints, and Luke Johnson and Matt Paris are going to be doing Saints Insider podcasts from Irvine, and Rod Walker will be joining them, and eventually Jeff Duncan too. So keep it locked. We'll have wall-to-wall coverage out there.
Also, Rod had a great column this morning, by the way, on his predictions for what to look for in camp, and a couple, nuggets as only Rod can present. So that's also worth going check out NOLA.com/sports/Saints. Make sure you do it. Insider podcast. What days are you guys doing it again? Tell me.
It's going to be we're Wednesdays and Fridays during the season, but it's going to be more intermittent during camp. It's going to really depend on when Luke and Matt can do it, to be quite honest with you.
All right.
And also when we can get one up without the danger of something happening that changes everything we're talking about. So.
Well, as you subscribe to the Dattitude YouTube page, and we thank you. Also, if you haven't done so already, a lot of our people have here, a lot of our regulars have, but subscribe to the Saints Insider page as well. Zach, we'll talk to you soon.
All right, man.
All right, Zach Ewing, and love his insight. And look, I'm not just saying this because I'm an employee. I mean, obviously I'm biased, but our coverage is second to none here. It really is. I mean, if you want Saints coverage, we're going through is second to none, and it will be, of course, over the next month and a half during camp and into the season. All right, and when we get to the season, we'll be going 4 days a week here on Dattitude. All right. Before we get to the extra point, we told you earlier that we'll let you know more about how Evangeline Securities can help you figure out what your family or privately owned business might be worth and whether it's time to sell. How do they do it? Well, after their complimentary evaluation of your company. If you decide to proceed, our native New Orleanian experts, Nick Braden, Ron Hemelt, and the folks at Evangeline will begin an extensive auction process among established private equity funds from around the world and maximize that return process for the founder and his or her family. Is this you? Wait, no, not you, Miss Gale. We don't want you to sell anything except tickets. Oh, and make sure they're wearing black and gold this year, all right? What's that? Of course, tell your friends about Evangeline, for sure. Evangeline Securities is the top producer on their platform. There are very few companies like them in this area. None with their dedication and success. They are fully licensed and ready to serve you. So get in touch with Nick and Ron about what is really important. You have heard me say this. What is really important? That is the rest of your life. You can find them at www.evangelinsecurities.com. Brian, we got to turn the volume to 10 and too much bass. I will tell you this. The last time I turned my volume up, I got this weird ratchety sound. So I not to go off on a tangent, but I've been playing with my sound a lot the past, I don't know, a couple weeks. So after playing with it, this is kind of what I came up with. We also do the podcast, remember? So if it is too loud on the pod, then it gets this weird sound. So anyway, we're still working on it, but that's what we got to where we are with the sound right now. So we'll keep working on it. All right. Extra point time. When coming up with a name for this show, I guess I should change the slide, huh? See, you got me thinking so much about my sound. I forgot to change the slide. There we go. I told you I would show you Joe Burrow. There he is. How about that picture? Take a look at that and think for a second while I start the extra point. All right. When coming up with the name for this show 3 years ago, I wanted to incorporate a combination of my proudness of being a lifelong New Orleanian and the essence of who I am. Hence, Dattitude was born. For today's extra point, with very little significant goings-on at this time of year, when the only real sports news is football players showing up for the 6-week prep for the upcoming season, we searched for something worthy to mention and for me to share my thoughts upon. Enter Joe Burrow. As he sported his fresh bleach blonde buzz cut to enter Cincinnati Bengals training camp on Tuesday, we could only think of one thing. For the next couple minutes, Dattitude will be known as Dattitude, as in Houday. Now, it may be a little cheesy, but we wanted to find a way to shower approval of Burrow's expression of doing things his way. This seems to be sort of a July version of an end zone dance. Maybe it's not quite Terrell Owens and his showering of the popcorn. Sure, it isn't Randy Moss's full moon or even Joe Horn's post-touchdown cell phone call. But Joe Burrow has style, and I like it. While some old school fogies might say, who cares? I say it's a message. It's a message that Burrow is not cool with the status quo and that he's ready to take his Bengals to the next level. You know how I try to avoid giving spoiler alerts, but one of the top values in this preseason might be the Bengals to win the Super Bowl at plus 1,300. We all know that teams first rally around their coach. Second, they rally around their captain. And Burrow unquestionably is the leader of the Cincinnati Bengals. While he might not be the real Slim Shady, he has a chance to be the 2024 version of Tom Brady. Okay, maybe that's going a bit too far, but you get the picture. And while Dattitude laughs at the thought or the notion that Houday preceded Houdat or which one is better, we acknowledge this. We know which one has a better chance of being chanted in the Superdome in February. You go, Joe Burrow. We are behind you 100%. That is going to wrap it up for us here on this Wednesday. Training camp. Football is started, boys and girls. A reason to get excited. I don't care if I got too much bass. See, I was going to mention the real Slim Shady, and all of a sudden I got too much bass. Just so happened that way. I want to thank today's guest, Zach Ewing, of course, Gabe Henderson, not just behind the scenes anymore. We hope you can join us on Friday when we will welcome in Larry Holder of The Athletic for part 2 of our 8-part NFL preview session. We'll be looking, as I told you, at the AFC West. That's going to be a really tough division to predict the winner of that one. But you'll still want to tune in anyway. A reminder to subscribe to our Dattitude page, our Dattitude YouTube page, and click the little bell to receive notifications when we go on the air live. You can also find us wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple, Spotify, and many more. And as always, you can find a replay of the show on NOLA.com/sports. Jerry asking about that new look. Say his name and he will appear. Yes, A-Town, I got you, my friend. All right, that'll do it. Or the real Joe Shiesty? Please stand up, Gabe Henderson. That is just wrong. And we'll end it with that. We will see you on Friday, everybody. Hopefully with nothing but positivity and good news. Take it easy, my friends.
If you're looking for the latest scoop and in-depth interviews on the Saints, the NFL, the Pelicans, LSU, along with the best bets of the week, then lucky you. Along with high-powered, in-the-know guests who cover our teams, Jim Derry brings plenty of Dattitude. And he'll always tell you the way it is, or at least the way he thinks it is.